So to finish off, let's talk about the HR planning process. So basically, I've already given you a brief idea of what we need to do, but we're going to take a look at it in detail now. The first thing we need to do is understand that HR planning is about matching the employee's abilities to the company's requirements, thinking about the future, not just the present arrangements, but also forecasting for the future. So the first thing we need to do is understand the organization, analyze the organization, the objectives of the organization, the long and short-term goals, and also be able to identify the external environment in which our company is operating in. Then we are going to understand how we can convert the corporate objectives to our HR objectives. So in order to achieve the corporate objectives, ask yourself, what should the HR objectives be? Then we're going to analyze the potential workforce. We're going to also analyze the current workforce so that we can understand what we are going to need based on the long-term goals. Then we're going to determine and forecast future needs of HR based on our corporate plans, functional plans, future activity levels, and future HR needs. Then we're going to identify the workforce gaps against future needs. Now, what does this mean? We're going to identify if the current workforce that we have is enough to cover the needs of our human resources that we're going to have in the future. So we're going to attempt and try to avoid overstaffing and understaffing. And we're also going to assess our existing workforce. And what is the tool? The manpower skill inventory, which I've already talked about before. And to finish off, the manpower skill inventory is basically understanding the present and potential capabilities of our workforce in a qualitative and quantitative way. So what is MPSI? I included here a video for you guys to take a look at so you can get a much clearer understanding of this inventory process. So back to identifying workforce gaps. Basically, we will be able to create a comparison between the existing workforce and the projected workforce in the future, which is going to tell us whether we have a surplus or a deficit or shortage of our workforce in the future. And these gaps don't necessarily have to be about the human workforce. They may not be, well, we're going to need 1,000 workers and now we only have 988. It may be in terms of skills, in terms of technological, in terms of knowledge, etc. And these gaps can be bridged by training and developing, etc. So what actions can we take to address shortages, surpluses, or skill mismatches? Well, the first thing we can do is create an action plan so that we can understand how we can fill HR gaps, we can avoid surpluses and reskill employees, and maybe transfer employees. And to finish up, we're going to be able to monitor, control, and evaluate the HR planning effort. And of course, as you know, this is something that is ongoing. So once the plans have been implemented, the human resource structure will need to continuously be evaluated. So our monitoring and control plays will include allocation and utilization of our human resource over time. So the control of the human resource costs will be another aspect that we will need to monitor and control on a never-ending cycle. So when we are forecasting manpower requirements, what we're going to need in the future, what do we need to consider? Well, we need to be able to consider the demand for the goods and services, the supply and demand of our products, of what it is that we are selling. We also need to bear in mind the objectives that our organization has created. What kind of strategies can be placed on our table so that we need to be able to forecast manpower requirements? Well, how about introducing new products, or expanding into a new market, or changing the production methods, etc. So what can we think of when we think of our forecasting? Well, the first thing is we have created a strategy, strategic planning, which is going to allow us to understand what our HR requirements will be in the future. We have to compare this based on the availability, the supply that we have in our HR, and we have to see if that will be a match. If it's a match, great, you've done your job, there's nothing else for you to do. If it's not a match, then you have to understand and see whether or not we need to develop programs that will increase supply availability or reduce demand, HR requirements, or develop programs to decrease supply or increase demand, depending on where the mismatch is. So, typical responsibilities of HR planning. Here we can see the HR unit as a whole and the managers within each department, where the HR unit will participate in the strategic planning process for the entire organization. However, the manager will identify supply and demand needs for their specific department. The HR unit will identify HR strategies. Managers will discuss their HR planning information with the HR specialists. The HR unit also designs data systems for HR planning. The manager, however, integrates the HR plan that has been given to them with the departmental plans that have been developed. The HR unit compiles and analyzes data from managers based on the staffing needs, and the managers actually monitor that HR plan in order to identify if changes need to be done. And the HR unit, of course, will implement the HR plan as approved by the higher ups. And the manager will actually review each employee's succession plans that are associated with the HR plan. So what else do we need to consider? Well, changes in production methods. We've seen that before, where, for example, there may be a change from labor intensiveness to capital incentiveness. What does this mean? When the manpower demand reduces, there is a change where, for example, let's say that our manufacturing plant is going to be now including, let's say, 10 new machines that are robots and only need to be manned by one person, as opposed to machines that are that have to be manned by one person each. So we can see now it's 10 automated machines with only one person manning it, as opposed to 10 machines that are not automated, and so one person has to be manning each one. As you can see, this capital intensiveness production method will actually decrease the manpower required. Then other factors, people who retire, people who resign. There's the retainment of talent is always going to be one of the biggest challenges. And of course, you will never know. You may be able to identify people who are unhappy or who you know are looking to be promoted and don't receive that promotion. And you may have that intuition that says this person's going to leave. But most times these resignations will come as a surprise. And of course, we need to be able to identify them as early on as we can, if possible. Then, of course, leave, maternity leave, sickness, etc., and deaths, untimely deaths. These are things that we do need to be able to forecast, even though, of course, we don't have a crystal ball to know when these things will happen. And then other external factors like economic, social, political, etc. So what methods can we use when we are forecasting? Well, we can use an informal, which is based on informal methods. The manager from the sales department has told you that he thinks that one of the people in the sales force is going to leave because they've been expressing that they are unhappy in the company. These are informal methods. Then expert estimating. This is actually sitting down with each department head in order to understand and be able to forecast needs. Then the Delphi technique is actually forecasting based on a more formal approach, which is utilizing available factors, specialized reports, interviews, and discussions that are actually done by a specialist team. And then unit demand, where here we ask each manager to understand and study the jobs that they manage and submit an estimate to the department head of what they believe will be future HR needs. And then, of course, trend projection. If we know that we want to, for example, begin increasing our production, or we're going to open up a new manufacturing plant, we can use mathematical formulas like, for example, to manufacture 100 units, we need one operator. Well, to manufacture 200, then we'll need two. So what can we do to estimate the internal labor supply for a given unit or a given department? Well, we look at the current staffing level minus the projected outflows of the year plus the projected inflows for the year, which equals to the internal supply of next year. So what can we look at? The current staffing level. The source of inflows are all of the employees that are coming into the company. They can be external hires. They can be transfers from another department. They can be people who have been promoted. They can be people who have been called into work. And what is our source of outflows? The companies, the employees that leave the company. Well, there can be, for example, promotions, somebody who's in the department who is now moving to another department. Labor turnover, terminations, that person's not doing their job well, you are letting them go. Demotions, that person is now being demoted to a job with less responsibility. Retirement, deaths, layoffs, etc. So to finish off, what are the benefits and the problems in HR planning? Well, the benefits are very clear, of course. We can get a better understanding and a very clear, realistic picture of the dimensions of our human resources when we are making strategic business decisions. Through better HR management, we can lower our labor costs. We have already seen that in previous slides. We can also have a more timely recruitment, which allows us to anticipate HR needs. And we can also include projected groups through planned increases in workforce diversity. And of course, we can better develop managerial talent. Now, what about the pitfalls? Well, there are a few problems. The first thing is that there is an inaccuracy due to improper forecasting. Then, of course, there is issues that have to do with the time and the cost associated to collecting data so that we can plan. Then there can be also resistance by employees and employers or the higher ups because they don't understand why do I need to do this? It's not necessary. When somebody says they're resigning, they'll just give me our 2-week notice, and 2 weeks is plenty of time to find somebody qualified. That's a person who is not aware of all of the issues and challenges that can be posed by resignations. Then, of course, there are uncertainties. We can't be able to forecast somebody that is being diagnosed with a terminal illness. These are the kind of things. Other things, labor turnover, absenteeism, changes in the technology, etc. And of course, another very important problem is inadequate support from our top management. And two huge problems that we can have in HR planning is having a surplus or having a shortage. So let's take a look at them. How can we avoid a surplus? The first thing, stop recruitment. No more, don't post up any job openings. There are no more vacancies. Tell everybody who is who is being interviewed that you are no longer hiring. That's it. Stop. Then transfer any excess employees to vacant positions. It's not necessary to open up a job recruitment process to bring in somebody external for a specific position if somebody from another department can fill that position. Then stop overtime. If you see that this is a trend that has been taking place in your company, then just stop overtime and try to include other ways that you can staff people into your company by transferring them from other places. And how can we avoid shortages? Well, the first thing is that we can contract work. We can outsource work from somebody outside of our company. We can charge them, we can pay them by the hour, we can pay them by the project, we can pay them by the day. It doesn't require us to actually commit to them full time. and just allows us to cover and be productive during the times in which we require more workforce. Then, of course, over time, this is something that will not be as immediate a solution as contracting work or outsourcing, but begin recruitment processes. Increase the recruitment processes over time so that you can start getting people coming into employee inflows, as we saw before, coming into your organization in order to avoid shortages. Then also you can employ people on temporary or contract basis. You can also invest in automizing things. So there are specific tasks that don't need to be manually done, then automate them. And then of course, you can always refer to the workforce that you already have. You can train them, reskill them, develop them so that they can take on more responsibilities as well. So this brings us to the end of this week's class. For next week, I would like you to read Chapter 4 in our Strategic Human Resource Management, A Guide to Action textbook, and Chapter 2 in our Human Resource Management book. So have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.